Before we start, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and keep your eyes open because some stories don't end when the lights go out. And this one lives behind locked doors. The sirens screamed through the humid Louisiana night as two correctional trucks sped toward the main gate of Angola Prison. Rain hammered the concrete like thrown gravel, turning the yard into a blur of flashing lights and shadows. Inside the transport van, one man sat unnaturally still while the others shifted nervously around him. His name was Darius Bell, convicted, armed robber, known enforcer, alleged member of a group most officers refuse to speak about aloud, the redhatgang. At 2:14 a.m., the prison radio crackled with a message that made every guard on duty go silent. Inmate down. Sector C. Possible homicide. Within minutes, officers flooded the corridor. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, illuminating the cold, damp floor. A body lay motionless near the showers, blood mixing with water running toward the drain. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses willing to talk. Only one thing stood out. A red baseball cap placed carefully on the victim's chest. Warden Alan Pierce arrived first, his boots echoing down the hall. He had spent 20 years inside Angola, long enough to know when something was wrong beyond the ordinary violence. This wasn't random. This was a message. He glanced at Captain Maria Lawson, head of internal investigations, whose jaw tightened as she studied the scene. Third one this month, she muttered. Pierce nodded, and every time the same symbol. Lawson crouched beside the victim. The inmate's name was Carl Jensen, low-level offender, no enemies on record. Yet someone wanted him gone badly enough to leave a signature. The Red Hat Gang didn't just kill, people said. They enforced rules no one officially acknowledged. And tonight, another rule had been broken. Outside, thunder rolled as Detective Nate Rivera stepped through security. Unlike prison staff, he came from state homicide, called in when cases became complicated. He glanced at the cap. So it's true, he said quietly. Lawson folded her arms. Depends who you ask. The rumor was simple. Inside Angola existed an invisible hierarchy that even guards tiptoed around. A network of inmates who controlled jobs, protection, and discipline. They didn't recruit loudly or start public fights. They operated in silence. And when someone crossed them, a red hat appeared. Rivera began interviewing inmates before dawn, moving cell to cell while rain drummed against barred windows. Most claimed ignorance. Some refused to make eye contact. One older prisoner finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. You don't investigate red hats, he said. You survive them. Rivera leaned closer. Who runs it? The man shook his head slowly. You think it's one person? That's the mistake everyone makes. Meanwhile, Darius Bell was escorted into his new unit. His reputation preceded him. Inmates watched through cracked doors as he passed, silent acknowledgments exchanged in quick glances. One inmate slipped him a folded note during breakfast. Rule broken. New vote tonight. Bell read it once and burned it with a lighter he wasn't supposed to have. In the administration building, Lawson and Rivera combed through records. Every victim had one thing in common. They had recently spoken to staff about moving to protective custody. Potential informants. Rivera frowned. Someone's cleaning house. And they know everything, Lawson replied. Schedules, interviews, transfers, things they shouldn't know. The implication hung in the air. Someone inside the system was feeding information. As the day stretched into night, tension spread through the prison. Officers reported unusual quiet. Yard groups staying separate. Eyes watching. Pierce called an emergency meeting. Lockdown if we need it, he ordered. I want every camera checked. But security footage offered nothing. Cameras in Sector C had gone dark for exactly 7 minutes during the murder. A glitch, maintenance claimed. Rivera didn't believe it. At 10:37 p.m., another call came in. An inmate worker discovered something hidden inside the laundry room wall, a small notebook wrapped in plastic. Inside were names, dates, and strange symbols. Next to several names was a simple mark, a red circle. Jensen's name was there. So were 2 others still alive. Lawson felt a chill crawl up her spine. It's a list. Rivera turned pages slowly. Not just a list. It's an order. Before they could react, alarms blared across the prison. Sector D lockdown breach. Officers scrambled as inmates shouted from their cells. In the chaos, someone slipped past surveillance. Someone who knew exactly where blind spots were. Rivera sprinted toward the corridor, heart pounding. As he turned the corner, he froze. On the wall, written in red paint, were 4 words. Rules don't leave here. Behind him, Lawson's radio crackled with panic. Another inmate had vanished during the confusion, one of the names from a notebook. The race against time had just begun, and as Rivera stared at the message, he realized the investigation wasn't hunting a single killer. They were walking straight into a system that had been running long before they arrived. But the real shock came moments later when Lawson received a file pulled from old archives. The original founder of the redhatgang wasn't an inmate. It was a former correctional officer, and someone inside Angola was still protecting the legacy. The rain stopped just before dawn, leaving Angola wrapped in heavy silence. Fog clung to the fences, blurring the watchtowers into ghostly shapes. Inside the administration building, Detective Nate Rivera stared at the old personnel files spread across the table. Former correctional officer Leonard Crow, terminated in 1987 after allegations of abuse that were never proven. Several inmates had died under suspicious circumstances during his time at the prison, but records were incomplete. Pages were missing, testimonies erased. What remained was a single note scribbled by a supervisor decades ago. Crow believed prisoners needed a hierarchy to keep order. Rivera looked up at Captain Maria Lawson. If a guard started this, he said slowly, then the gang wasn't born from inmates fighting for power. It was engineered. Lawson nodded grimly. And if that's true, the people running it today might still have help from staff. Across the prison yard, lockdown continued. Inmates pressed against cell doors, watching officers move with unusual urgency. Rumors spread faster than official announcements. Someone had disappeared. Someone was marked next. Darius Bell sat calmly on his bunk, listening to the echoes of shouting down the corridor. The man in the next cell whispered through the bars, "They're looking for Marcus." Bell didn't react, but his jaw tightened. Marcus Hale, one of the names in the notebook, had vanished during the lockdown breach. And if Marcus was running, it meant the rules had already been broken. Later that morning, Rivera interviewed guards who had worked the night shift. Most answers sounded rehearsed. Nobody noticed anything unusual. Nobody saw who disabled the cameras. Then he reached Officer Grant Ellis. Young, nervous, sweating despite the cold air. Sector C cameras don't just shut off, Rivera said. Someone manually reset them. Ellis hesitated. Maintenance handles that. Rivera leaned forward. You were on that hallway. I didn't see anything, Ellis said too quickly. When Rivera left the room, Lawson spoke, quietly. He's hiding something. Or someone told him what to say, Rivera replied. Meanwhile, inside the prison, another discovery escalated the danger. Officers searching the laundry room found a second hidden compartment. Inside were photographs, grainy images of inmates taken from odd angles, some sleeping, some walking the yard. Surveillance done by prisoners. Every photo had dates and symbols marked on the back. Next to several names were small letters, EVS, execution, violation, silence. Lawson felt her stomach turn. This wasn't just a gang. It was a system of judgment. As night approached, tension crackled like static. Warden Pierce ordered increased patrols, but unease spread among the staff. Some officers avoided eye contact. Others whispered when Lawson passed. The prison felt divided not between guards and inmates, but between those who knew and those who didn't. In the isolation wing, Rivera met an inmate who requested protection earlier that week, Anthony Reeves. Thin, exhausted, eyes constantly scanning the room. I know what the red hats are, Reeves said quietly. They decide who survives. Rivera kept his voice calm. Who decides? Reeves hesitated. There's a council. Older guys. but they don't move unless someone above them gives the signal. Above them? Rivera asked. Reeves nodded slowly. Someone on the outside. Before Rivera could ask more, the lights flickered. A loud, metallic bang echoed through the corridor. Then another. Officers rushed past as alarms started screaming again. Sector B disturbance. Rivera sprinted out, heart pounding. In the chaos, inmates shouted from cells, banging on doors. Smoke drifted through the hall, a small fire set deliberately to create confusion. Lawson's voice came through the radio. Reeves, get back to Reeves. Rivera turned and ran. When he reached the isolation cell, the door stood slightly open. Inside, Anthony Reeves lay on the floor, unconscious but breathing. On the wall behind him, written in toothpaste and blood, was a single sentence. No witnesses. Rivera felt ice run down his spine. Someone had reached a protected witness in less than 2 minutes. They were everywhere. Medical teams rushed Reeves out, but before they left, he grabbed Rivera's sleeve weakly. It's not about loyalty, he whispered. It's about balance. What balance? Rivera asked urgently. Reeves coughed. They believe chaos keeps the prison alive, and if the balance breaks, people die. His eyes rolled back as doctors pulled him away. Hours later, Rivera and Lawson reviewed the surveillance again. This time, they noticed something new, a shadow moving near the isolation wing, just before the attack. Officer Ellis. Lawson swore under her breath. He lied. Pierce ordered Ellis detained immediately, but when officers went to find him, his locker was empty. Badge gone. Uniform missing. He had vanished inside the most secure prison in the state. Panic spread quickly. If a guard was involved, no one knew who to trust anymore. Outside, media helicopters began circling. News of multiple deaths and lockdown leaks reached the public. Pressure mounted from state officials demanding answers. Rivera stood alone in the corridor, staring at the red message still painted on the wall. Rules don't leave here. He realized the warning wasn't for inmates. It was for investigators. That night, Darius Bell received another note slid under his cell door. Counsel moved. Outsider exposed. Final decision coming. Bell folded the paper carefully. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. Because if the counsel was making a final decision, someone high up was about to fall. Back in the administration building, Lawson burst into Rivera's office, holding a newly recovered file. You need to see this, she said, breathless. Inside was a transfer order signed 30 years ago, authorizing Leonard Crow's removal from Angola after an internal scandal. The signature at the bottom froze Rivera's blood. Warden Allen Pierce's father. Rivera looked up slowly. This thing, it never ended. Lawson nodded. It was inherited. Just then, the prison went dark. Every light, every camera, every door lock clicked at once. And somewhere in the darkness, a voice echoed through the corridors. Darkness swallowed Angola Prison whole. For 3 long seconds, there was nothing, no lights, no hum of electricity, only the distant echo of metal doors shifting and the rising noise of confusion spreading through the blocks. Then emergency lights flickered on, bathing the corridors in a weak red glow that turned every face into a shadow. Detective Nate. Rivera grabbed his flashlight and ran toward the control room. Officers shouted over each other, radios crackling with panicked updates. Cells opening in Sector D. Multiple movement in the yard. Someone's in the admin wing. This wasn't a power failure. It was coordinated. Captain Maria Lawson stormed down the hallway beside him. They planned this, she said. Someone's directing every move. Inside the prison blocks, inmates pressed forward, sensing something different in the air. Not chaos organization. The kind of quiet order that came before something final. Darius Bell stepped out of his cell as the lock released with a click. He didn't run like the others. He walked slowly, watching men gather in the corridor. Some wore red cloth tied around their wrists. Others lowered their heads in respect as he passed. The council was assembling. Rivera reached the control room and froze. The system wasn't hacked from outside. A manual override had been activated from within the building, requiring 2 authorized staff codes. Lawson stared at the screen. 2 people, she whispered. This goes higher than we thought. Before Rivera could answer, shouting erupted from the hallway. Officers dragged a struggling man into the room. Officer Grant Ellis. His face was bruised, his eyes wild. You don't understand, he shouted. I didn't have a choice. Rivera grabbed him. Who's running this? Ellis shook his head desperately. It's bigger than one person. The council chooses. They always choose. Who gave the order tonight? Lawson demanded. Ellis hesitated, fear flooding his face. The warden. Silence fell. Rivera turned slowly toward Lawson, both realizing the same horrifying possibility. Warden Alan Pierce had known. They rushed toward the administration wing, passing inmates who strangely stepped aside as they moved. No attacks, no resistance, just silent watching. Inside the warden's office, Pierce stood alone, calm, hands resting on his desk. Emergency lights cast long shadows behind him. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Rivera's voice hardened. Your father started the redhatgang. You kept it alive. Pierce sighed as if tired. You think prisons run on rules written in manuals? They don't. Order comes from fear, from structure. You're talking about murder, Lawson snapped. I'm talking about survival, Pierce replied. Before the Red Hats, Angola was chaos. Endless riots. Guards dead. Inmates killing each other without reason. My father understood something no one else did. Inmates police themselves better than we ever could. Rivera stepped forward. So, you let them execute people? Pierce's expression darkened. I didn't let anything happen. The council decides who threatens the balance. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed outside, the sound of dozens of footsteps approaching. Pierce glanced toward the door. Tonight's vote isn't about inmates, he said softly. It's about outsiders who disturb the balance. Rivera realized too late. They were the targets. The corridor filled with inmates moving in eerie silence. Darius Bell stepped forward at the front, eyes locked on Pierce. For the first time, the warden looked uncertain. Bell spoke calmly. You changed the rules. Pierce frowned. What? You protected your own people, Bell said. The council never agreed. Lawson whispered, he's turning on him. Bell faced the gathered inmates. The old rule stands. No one above the council. Murmurs spread like a wave. Pierce's voice rose with panic. You don't understand, I kept this place alive. You kept control, Bell said quietly. The tension snapped. Officers moved forward. Inmates surged. Chaos exploded in the hallway, shouting, struggling, flashes of batons and desperate grabs. Rivera pulled Lawson toward the exit as alarms screamed back to life. Pierce tried to run, but Bell caught him first. Rivera looked back, just long enough to see the warden surrounded, red light flickering across terrified eyes. Then security teams stormed in, separating everyone with force. Riot units flooded the corridor, forcing inmates to the ground. The lights finally came fully on. Hours later, silence returned to Angola. Pierce was gone, evacuated under heavy guard, his future uncertain. Officer Ellis confessed to helping manipulate systems under orders. The council members were separated and transferred to different facilities. Official reports would later call it a coordinated security breakdown. But Rivera knew better. The Red Hat gang wasn't just a gang. It was a tradition built on fear, passed down through generations, hidden inside the system itself. Days later, as Rivera prepared to leave the prison, he stopped at the evidence locker. The Red Hats sat sealed in plastic bags, motionless symbols of a hidden war. Lawson approached. You think it's over? She asked. Rivera hesitated. Systems like that don't disappear overnight. He walked outside. Sunlight harsh after so many hours in darkness. Media vans lined the road. Officials promised reform. Investigations launched. But as Rivera drove away, his phone buzzed. An anonymous message. No sender. No number. Just 6 words. Balance restored. New council elected. Rivera's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They had removed the warden. But the rules survived. Inside Angola, an inmate bent down in the yard, picking up something half buried in the dirt a faded red cap missed during cleanup. He brushed the dust off slowly, then placed it on his head. Far above, the watchtower lights turned, scanning the yard like nothing had ever changed. And somewhere behind those walls, the system began again. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Like, comment, and subscribe if you dare.